What's up, Lego builders? Welcome back to Coconut Brick Studios for the final week of building Coruscant in LEGO. This is gonna be wild. The craziest thing for me is definitely the Senate building roof. As you guys know, last time you saw it, there was no roof on it, so I've got to make that whole thing happen this week. You may be thinking to yourself, Coconut, why not slow down? Take an extra week, take your time, why rush? Now, those are some good questions. However, I have some issues. As of right now, the finale is scheduled to come out June 11th, which is next Sunday. If I were to push the finale back by 1 week, it would then fall on June the 18th, which is the Sunday during Brickworld Chicago, a very big Lego convention. And so I don't want to be competing with that for views and just interaction with my finale. And then the week after that, I have a family reunion. Timing and stuff aside, as you've probably noticed, my whole channel is basically shut down. I'm only doing Coruscant stuff. I feel like my whole life has ground to a halt and just is revolving around because Coruscant. So I got to get it done at this point. It's crunch time. Also, at the end of this update, you're not going to see the finished mock with minifigs on it. I like to save the final full reveal until the actual walkthrough. But I have faith in myself. I think I can do it. So don't forget to execute Order 66 on that like button and let's get started. To start this week, I'm going to connect all the pillars together with a brick beam. I added a row of plate under and on top of the bricks to strengthen it and allow it to bear the weight of the roof over the long spans or spaces between the pillars. I am going to add a row of rounded 1x2 plates along the curved section of the wall running towards the back of the mock, but this will just be so it looks like the support beam runs the whole length of the building, because I doubt this beam will actually be able to hold anything because of how weak it is. After that, I'm finally finishing the window. Now the senators can gaze out over Coruscant as they eat their lunch and pretend it isn't being run by a Sith Lord. I also have one more doorway to block out, which is real lightweight stuff. I also need to finish tiling off the giant skyscraper. I was waiting to do that until I figured out what the plan was with it, and now that I know what's going down, finishing it will be a piece of cake. I'm just kidding. When is finishing something this big and complicated ever a piece of cake? I'm also adding some fire to the broken area because I'm sure some wires, pipes, and other stuff got severed by the gunship and then ignited into flame. Plus, you can't go wrong with a ruined skyscraper by lighting it on fire. Well, Coruscant is a mess. I've got all the minifigures out from the minifigure showcase still. I'm going to leave them set up until I set them up on the mock. That way I don't have to put them away, get them back out again. I've got bins out. I've been working like crazy, just frantically trying to get everything done. I have really just one thing left at this point, and that's the Senate building. Like, I finished up this bank. I put in the flame pieces. I put in those black brick, and that looks much better. Very pleased with how this all came together. The flames look pretty realistic too. I mean, it's always hard to capture a good realistic fire with Lego flame pieces or just Lego pieces in general, but I'm happy with how that looks. Moving on to the Senate building, I've been hard at work with the pillars. I'm trying to get this whole frame put in and finished so I can start the roof. It's been tough because I'm not sure what exactly it needs to look like and what exactly it's going to be doing, just because I'm not sure where the roof is going to sit, how it's going to sit on everything. So this is very prototype-ish and could be subject to change, especially this back piece right here. Honestly, don't know how this is all going to work out because it's got nowhere to sit on, nowhere to rest on, so it's not going to have any kind of structural functionalities. But what I'm thinking about doing is maybe having like a little pillar right here come up and then have like a Technic beam run out here and then connect to it. That way it's not, at least not sagging around. But I really just need to get started on the roof so I can figure that out. But the rest of the pillars are in, and there is a problem over there. So I got all the pillars in, got the frame in, and then I happened to bend down like this to look and see where the pillars lined up with the Senate building wall. And much to my dismay, you can see the panels stick up higher than the pillar. And that's because the panels just naturally, as I've talked about, kind of slope upward in that direction. And I wasn't really thinking about that at the time, but that's going to be a problem now because the roof was supposed to have a flat section that goes on the bottom that basically runs out from behind the Senate building and sits on this, and that's going to be the foundation to hold the roof up. But I can't do that over here because pretend this is the bottom panel I was talking about. If I were to stick it on the pillar, you can see it smacks into the panels. It can't go over the top of the panels without it being uneven like that. So I think I might have to forego the panels, the bottom panels over here on this section. I don't know if that's going to work out. Once again, I just got to start building and see what happens. Now, the last thing I wanted to show you guys is this skyscraper, and I am genuinely surprised with how good this thing looks. It's looked ugly and bad the entire series because it's been unfinished, and it's so cool to see like how much something can change just by adding certain colors, or not even adding certain colors, but just adding matching colors. Like the light bluish gray base with the dark bluish gray highlights matches the rest of the buildings, just makes it look so good. So I'm really happy with that because I honestly wasn't too excited about this building, but my excitement for it is definitely going up. I've got a bunch of fire in this one too. I stuck all the fire on this side, but I think I'll probably stick some more around the back once I get those flame pieces in from Bricklink. I made this one a lot bigger than that one because the building's bigger and, you know, the gunship smashed through this one and stuff, so I wanted a little bit more flames.
The moment I've been putting off for too long now, building the roof. I built a wall of brick on the inside of the Senate building so I can run a row of plate from the pillars to the inside, thus creating a foundation for me to build the roof on. Once that's done, it's time to assemble some panels. I'm gonna build basically the same panels that I did in the sloped section of the Senate building, but much smaller. That way I can hopefully create a more rounded shape and have more control with how and where each panel will sit. I also need some long straight panels which will run along the entire front of the building. I've joked about this before, but in all seriousness, this Senate building could have been a whole mock series in and of itself. Now I need to build towers running up the insides of the curved section. I'm using small turntables which will allow me to turn the plates at an angle so they'll hopefully line up better with the curved wall. If I were to build just straight up from the ground, the brick probably wouldn't be at the right angle to allow me to run plate across and connect onto the top of the curved wall. I had an idea while I was thinking about assembling these smaller panels, which allowed me to use a piece I thought I would never use again. The big 2x2 ball joints from Kato Nemoidia. I'm so happy I get to use these because I have so many of them sitting around. These are much bigger and thicker than the smaller mixel joints that I've been using, so I hope they will hold up the panels better. Once I got the panels connected, I attached them to the building and tried to match the curve of the Senate wall as best I could. That was the hardest part of the build, and the long, smooth, straight panels went in much smoother since, you know, it's not that hard to line something up along a straight line.
Well, this is it. The final progress update or build check-in before the finale. Got some things to show you guys, and I do have a lot to say about the Senate building, but we'll get to that in a second. First, let's take a look at this road. So I made a relatively last-minute decision here and threw in another crater. I did that because I've been thinking about this stretch of the road and how relatively unscathed or undamaged it is, especially compared to the chaos and destruction that you see in the second half of the mock, which makes sense because, you know, this is where the majority of the battle is taking place. This is the center of the action. Everything's kind of passed this area by relatively quickly. I did want to show some kinds of a skirmish here because there are going to be droids who are fighting with clones, and, you know, that's definitely going to lead to some destruction. And I will be adjusting the lampposts, maybe taking a chunk out of the base, but I wanted that to be reflected in this road. And the crater itself turned out really good, really simple, just followed that same building process that I've done with all the others. One thing that I have yet to do is add a ring of tile and wedge plates and just random debris around the edge of the mock. That will just help, you know, finish it off and kind of help cover up this transition from broken up road to smooth finished road. Basically like what I did over here and over there. The reason I haven't put it in yet, someone was actually talking about this in the comments last week asking why, and that's because I saved those finishing touches, final details to the very end of the mock. If I were to put the final debris pieces around the edge of these craters as I finished them, the pieces would get knocked around and, you know, lost, taken apart, used for other things. So it just would save me a lot of time and effort to just wait till the very end to put them on when I'm putting the minifigs in. And speaking of craters, I've got one more to show you guys. I finally finished the clone gunship crater. I think it looks really good. I did something different over here because I didn't put these broken chunks of road at an angle like what I did over here at the Vulture Droid crash site. You can see, you know, they're all at different angles. These are kind of just laid flat on the ground, and I didn't like how the tops of these looked just sitting there. It didn't really look realistic, so I built a bunch of these wedge plates with like cheese slopes and stuff on top and placed them on top of the flat sections. And then I made some minor adjustments to these plateaus. I removed the inner corner statue from both, and then I'm adding just like some random debris bits of the statue around the base of it to make it look like it was destroyed, because I'm putting some mortars right here, so I want it to look like the clones basically just blasted this inner statue out of the way. That way they have a clear line of fire into the oncoming droids. Okay, Let's talk Senate building. I get overwhelmed every time I try to talk about this and kind of explain what's going on here because I got so much done off camera and so much is going on. There's just been a lot surrounding this Senate building, both with like the build and just with like the mental side. So I'm going to break this down into two sections. We'll do a structural progress update, and then I want to dive into some deeper, more kind of mental based stuff. So one thing I forgot to point out that I really liked with the window was how the pattern of tiles turned out. I specifically used 2x3 and 2x4 tiles and lined them all up vertically like this because I felt like that would help make it look like a more realistic window instead of doing just like a random tile pattern like what I've done in the clone base or entertainment complex floor where I just shove a bunch of random tiles together. I felt like this helped make it look like there are a bunch of little window panes connected together to create one giant window. So very happy with how that's looking. I also put in the black wall behind that final entrance. So now basically the entire bottom of the Senate building is done. It's just the roof and it looks so good. I'm really happy how these entrances turned out. I'm interested to see what it looks like with minifigs pouring out. Some people had suggested adding lights there, and I did think that would be kind of a cool idea, but I didn't know if that would look kind of weird like with the black. Like I don't know if it would make sense to have such a pitch black wall so close to lights, if that makes sense. Okay, moving on to the roof. So I did most of this without showing you guys because I didn't want to take the time to like set up a camera, do a time lapse, and I didn't want to have half my focus on the camera, half my focus on the build. I knew I needed to dedicate 100% of all my brain capacity to this. So I'll try and give you a quick overview of like what happened. So I basically created these two strips of panels that you guys saw, and then I stuck one on top of the other. And they were all connected together by these giant ball joints. Thanks to Cato Nemoidia for that. And then everything over here, both of these rows of panels are all connected to this one little pillar right here that sits atop this giant pillar. So these pillars actually came in clutch. I'm really happy I had the foresight to put those in because without that pillar, you can see I wouldn't really have any way to soundly or safely support this whole roof section. I do have this weird contraption thing I built. You guys saw that come together with like the turntables and stuff, which allowed me to position these big builds at the right angle to kind of match the same curve. And from that, I can run 2x plate to kind of help support this. But most of the heavy lifting is being done right there. And while this thing is pretty secure, like it's able to hold itself up, it is a very delicate balance right now because you can see this entire back portion of both panels is being held up by this little 1x3 clip. There wasn't anything else for it to rest on. There wasn't any kind of like structural support pillar or wall right here. So all that weight is coming down on this angled panel, and thankfully it's holding it pretty securely, but I am kind of afraid to touch it or break it in case this whole thing collapses. And then the entire second row of panels is being supported on top of that first row by these two little 1x3s. So this is a pretty good representation of my mental state right now, just barely hanging in there. But the front of the panels look okay. I definitely think they could be better. The reason I have this top layer of panel overlapping the bottom row is because I had this sitting directly on top of this row, but this bottom did not line up very well with the top of these. So there were all kinds of gaps and weird like spaces. It did not look good at all. So by overlapping this, I helped alleviate that and made for a much more seamless fit. Although unfortunately you can see there are still some gaps if you look underneath the mock, but there won't be too many angles like that in the final showcase, and you basically have to get down underneath it to really see that. Plus I might try adjusting or fiddling with things a little bit, but that brings me to a big issue with mock building. There comes a point in time where like it's not really beneficial to keep toying with something because you might get it to a spot where like it's good enough and it's doing its job, but if you continue to tweak or play around with it, you could end up breaking it and just making the whole thing worse, if that makes sense. Because I don't know if I can get this whole build exactly like this again if it breaks. So if I'm like playing around with these panels and those two clips that you guys saw in the back come off, this whole thing's coming down. It could potentially rip out this entire thing. Like we could have just potential catastrophic damage. So I'm not sure if I'm going to play with that too much. Thankfully, this middle row of panelings was so much easier because it's not curved. I basically, all I had to do was build two big strips of panel, and then I followed the same principle with the giant ball joints holding them up at an angle, and you can see they're just sitting on those little pillars, but all that came together pretty smoothly, and surprisingly enough, this all holds together really well. I think the extra size and grip of those 2x4 ball joints really helps hold this in place better. Oh yeah, one more thing I almost forgot. This is how tall the final roof will be. I'm not building the full complete thing for a few reasons. First being, like, considering how steep this angle is, that would be a massive roof that would go all the way up here. And I don't think this interior is structurally strong enough to hold a massive roof like that. I would need to rebuild all of this to be able to support something like that. And as you can see, like, the paneling has been a real big challenge, and I worry that the more of these panels I put on, the worse it'll look, or just take away from the build, and it won't look as good as if it just had these two. And I figured I will just build just enough to give you an idea of what it looks like and let your imagination do the rest. Sometimes, a little bit of mystery or just hints at what something looks like can be much more interesting and entertaining than showcasing it in its entirety. And I do have most of the panels built for this curved section over here. I'm just waiting for a few more tiles so I can tile off a couple and build a couple more of these panels, because it's so much easier to build them and tile them like this and then assemble the roof than try and assemble the roof and like delicately tile it off. I learned that with this bottom portion of the mock. So from a design standpoint, this whole mock is done. It's basically just cleaning up pockets like this, which is kind of hard to believe, honestly. So that's the structural side of things. Now let's dive into the mental side of things.
Okay, let's talk Senate building for a little bit. Also, don't mind this. I'm just testing out lavalier microphones, trying to find a good one for the finale so I can give you guys some nice crisp audio in that. But Sunday night found me sitting in my Lego room behind the Senate building, just in the pit of despair. I felt like I couldn't go on with the mock. I honestly felt like giving up a little bit, just because I felt like I had a impossible task in front of me, which was build a perfect Senate building. And no matter what I did, no matter what I tried, I couldn't figure out how to do that. And what I had come up with just didn't feel good enough. It felt like I couldn't put that out as the finale. It felt like basically the roof was going to ruin the entire mock. And this seems dramatic, I know, but like it had been a long time in getting to that point, because I've been dealing with some negativity towards the Senate building over the course of it being built. People disliking it, hating on it, whatever, it's fine. I don't need everybody to like my builds, but it did get to me, especially because it felt like people were ignoring the fact that I was trying my best and just working with what I had. Nobody's built something like this before. I don't really have much to reference for it, and it's a very difficult structure to build, and I felt like people were expecting an exact copy of it, and I had no idea how to deliver that. And so I'd kind of that had gotten into my head and gotten to me, and it felt like I needed to get out a perfect roof in order to overcome that. And I realized I had begun building towards their standards and their idea and perception of what this mock should be, and not mine. And that was a big realization, a really important thing for me to understand, because I'm not here to build other people's mocks. I'm here to build my mocks. And I love feedback. I love constructive criticism. It's part of what helps me grow and improve as a builder and a YouTuber and just a person in general. But just straight negativity obviously doesn't help with that. And I'd let it get to my head, and I was like, okay, this is what I need to do in order to appease that, or in order to fulfill this, which is not the case. I can only build as good of a mock as I'm capable of. I know that sounds obvious, but I don't think it's obvious to everybody. And I needed to realize that in order to be able to look at what I was building and be okay with it. To look at it and be like, I gave my best. This is the best effort I can give, and I can step back, I can walk away from that and be okay. It doesn't matter if it's not up to other people's building standards or their idea of what the mock should look like, because they're not the ones building this, I am. And don't get me wrong, I don't think the Senate building's perfect. I know there are things that could be improved or changed or just done in a better way, and I'm sure there are people who are more capable of doing it than I. But at the same time, I feel like I'm giving forth the best effort I can, given the circumstances, skills, budget, time that I have. So if anybody out there ever finds themselves in a similar situation, don't worry about other negative people. Don't allow yourself to build or create whatever it is you're creating to the expectations and desires of others. You do what you feel like is the best you can do, and you can walk away from that and take pride in knowing you did the best you could, and the next time around you'll be even better. And so hopefully myself and you will be able to look at the finale of Coruscant and just be able to appreciate it for what it is and know that I gave my best effort with it. But that's pretty much all I wanted to say about it. Time to get back to the build. In regards to building, there isn't much left to do, just touching up random areas and adding a little bit more battle damage in the entertainment complex. Unfortunately, there are still a few sections, namely the roof of the Senate building that I don't have the parts for, but hopefully those packages will come within the next few days so I can get this MOC done and get the finale out next week. As I look around the build, it still feels like an empty shell, but that'll change when the minifigs and final details go in and this MOC springs to life. I feel like I should have a little speech or something prepared to properly close out this series, but I don't really have much to say other than thank you. Thank you to each and every one of you who have supported and helped this build come together, from comments and views to donations and messages of support and feedback. So many of you had a hand in helping me fulfill my vision for this build, and I deeply appreciate that. And this may be the end of the series, but the best is yet to come. I have so many cool videos planned with this build, from cinematics and walkthroughs to price breakdowns and other good stuff. But that wraps up the last update for building Coruscant, and I will see you all at the finale, but until then, happy building.
To unfold when this knot is so tight, each step is chosen.